getting back to it. Next section, games matter. On 11 to 12, just a few block quotes from the text to talk about not just specifically like games, but also media and specifically leisure, why it matters. This is the last full paragraph on 11, and then I'll skip the middle of that paragraph and then go into 12. Everyday life, filled with both work and leisure, is where people regularly navigate deeply political, culturally productive, socio-technical systems. It is where politics comes at us sideways. So this isn't just, I'll kind of editorialize as we go. Politics is not just, when you're watching the news or when you're having explicit conversation about policy. It's just it bleeds in everywhere, right? Including when you're not at work, right? When you're also at play. While many are detached from what we might think of as serious civic engagement, which is what I just said, so it's like serious civic engagement, like hitting the streets, going to the polls, other than that, right? All of us each and every day confront a range of critical issues in our domestic and work lives among friends, colleagues, strangers, and family. Everything is always political. If someone is mean to you on the street, and it doesn't seem like there's anything political about it, there's still something political about it. A few lines down, yet games are now routinely tied to commercialized platforms, complex networks, and media infrastructures like never before. Companies, policies, and laws addressing everything from intellectual property to standards of behavior govern games. So games are in every facet of life today. A lot of my students, when I teach games, will say something like, well, I'm not a gamer. And then they'll kind of go on, but it's like, do you really not play video games ever? And I don't mean just like serious games, but also, like casual games, or thinking about gamic behavior, right? Like games have seeped into education, it's true, right? But specifically, like, those games are also, like what she's trying to point out, are not neutral. All sorts of decisions have been kind of rendered in those games and are kind of evident. Users, owners, and systems co-constitute a space that in turn shapes experience, goes back, right? There are all sorts of things that have influenced something even before you come into it. It is not neutral, right? This means that those very moments when people are engaging in play remain some of the most politically infused spaces. So what we think of as incredibly apolitical are entirely political because all sorts of governance has already happened. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there, right? Much like sports or other forms of media, leisure is deeply tied to gender, race, and sexuality, social identity and community, normative models, and complex systems of regulation. What is often cordoned off as simply leisure or fun is actually deeply central as well as formative in all our civic and political lives. This is a pretty solid passage about why media is never just entertainment, right? I'm so tired of hearing people say, like, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar. It's like, no. Again, there are all sorts of things going on. We just don't pay attention to them, right? Next few pages, she goes into a primer of game studies, right? And all I would really say, so it's like, this is the history of game studies. On 13, there's a line in that last full paragraph, there is a circuit of practice, experience, and production at work. So in a game, there's a circuit of practice, experience, and production. And we can't disassociate or untangle these things just because they're inconvenient or because we want to. Meaning we just can't talk about the thing that we want to talk about and ignore everything else. I mean, you can, but then you'd just be a really irresponsible kind of thinker or observer. 14 to 19, historical snapshots and methods. So this goes into the kind of methodology of the study. That this is another media studies book, one of the few that we've read that has a social science approach, like the one article about social media, right? There is, again, like an ethnographic bent, right? Meaning that, you know, she is doing ethnography, like studying people. But what I want to point out is just the massive amount of research that she's done. So again, just kind of emphasizing this is a professional media researcher and scholar that has literally written a book about Twitch that took her years to do. So her positions and her arguments and her claims come from, I mean, like, just look at the massive amount of undertaking that she's done in talking to streamers, participating in streams, studying them. This is hours and hours of research, right? So, you know, in that sense, like, yeah, like that's the basis of her claims. That's where it comes from. So similarly, like when you have an idea or a claim or an argument, what is the basis for it? Have you put in the work? Have you put in this amount of hours that someone like T.L. Taylor has in, like, you know, the position that you have? Like, this is something that we'll kind of go into on Thursday, but I do want you to think about, like, what is your own practice? You know, why do I believe the things that I do? And, you know, people always say, like, people always love to say, do your own research. It's very easy to say anything, right? But do they put in the same amount of research that someone like T.L. Taylor has? Or do we read something like this, like, no, I disagree. Like, based on what, though? Just because I don't like what she's saying, right? And then finally, when she talks about the structure of the book, she gets into how much about it is going to be regulatory and policy issues. Again, I'm not a law expert. I know very little about media law, but at the very least, I know that it matters immensely to media, right? You know, again, I didn't get into this business to read and study law, but you have to, because a lot of that is what it's about. Okay, so that is the introduction to the book and to Twitch. Thursday, we'll be on Twitch. We'll actually be on Twitch. We'll see what happens. It'll be live, so it'll be out of my control, really. At the very least, I can't guarantee it'll be fun, but I can guarantee it'll be not boring, I suppose, which are the same thing. But anyways, talk to you guys on Moodle. Let me know if you need anything. I'll see you soon.